Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, Michael Antonov shared what it was like scaling Oculus inside Facebook after the acquisition, the challenges of innovating within a massive organization, and why he eventually decided to explore a new direction beyond VR. If you missed it, be sure to check out part 2. In part 3, Michael dives into his early fascination with the biology of aging, his decision to study biology while still at Facebook, and how that curiosity sparked his first investments in biotech. He also shares how his passion for longevity research led to the founding of Formic VC, and how that journey eventually evolved into building Deep Origin, a company focused on modeling and simulating biology to accelerate drug discovery.
First of all, it was quite different from Autodesk. For one, the deal to sell and was signed was like written up and drafted and signed within 1 month, which is unheard of. So I think literally it was like 2 weeks, or a week, where lawyers and Brendan and Nate were negotiating, and they spent a week in Facebook and during the nights and so on. So, and they, basically went through all the terms and everything. So it was basically announced and signed like within a few weeks of making a decision and a handshake. I remember going to one dinner with Mark, and that's it. That's
great.
The kind of core reason we did it, and is that we saw that it's a very expensive industry to build, and we could have made an impact independently, but it would be a lot of inventory costs, a lot of manufacturing content. While Facebook was able and interested in putting a huge amount of money to actually make it happen, they had resources to do it. And in fact, they did. So this is a drastic difference from the Autodesk, where with Autodesk, we were sort of just on life support, we kind of supported in the shapes they were, and then suddenly expected to move and deliver something with no extra resources. And so you sort of right in the internal tension machine. And here it was a project which was deliberately invested with. So literally we were able to, as a sign-up deal, in fact, we were acquired manufacturing, a consulting shop company which was working for us before, 30, 40 people got rolled right into acquisition. Because they were making controllers and devices.
Whoa, so it's almost vertically integrating. They're
yes, and basically Brendan had this fund to hire anybody he wants, and he ended up stealing. There were 4 or 5 really top people from Valve, which got Valve really upset. So as the acquisition was closing, we're Michael Abrash was a legend. There's 3 or 4 legends in the game industry who are working in Valve, and Valve is a very good place to work in. You have a lot of freedom and also very well compensated. So this was non-trivial.
Yeah.
And you have. So basically, they moved because they could saw this can really move this project forward. So it really, the fact that Facebook did it, moved the whole industry forward. And suddenly we're building a team. So we went from 75 pre-acquisition to 150 right away with acquisition. And then it started growing and growing and growing. And over the next years, over the next 5 years, Mark has spent many billions a year on this. Right now, I think Facebook loses $2 billion a year in reality labs. So it's really overspending, quite honestly. But they did ship many products, and they picked up the industry. So in that sense, it's very different.
Oh, yeah, night and day. It's night and day. You're almost drowning in resources. You're just
up to a point. But then you have to do something with it, and the internal political dynamics come into place. So I think as a founder, unless you have a very particular way, you have skills to work with that type of organization, then it's hard to retain your influence. Because there's a lot of smart people around you, Everybody is good at what they do, or most people are anyway. And there is lots of agenda and things moving in parallel will need to be coordinated. And you still have to ship on your things, but if you have some belief and the organization believes something else, it's very hard to actually shift it. So those kind of dynamics come into play.
Interesting. And this is, it seems kind of like a theme with like the larger the organization gets, is just kind of like this is the natural, kind of the natural state. There's just like more stakeholders than you're like, it's almost like you have to like, you're talking about it at the Autodesk, you're just like, you almost have to like internal politic your way to get, to get your, your job is to ship this product, make the product good. But then you start introducing all this internal politics into it and it just like impedes you. And and Facebook, very, very large organization, it doesn't sound like they're completely immune to that either. It's just like the natural state of a large organization.
Yeah, it's humans. Like at some point, you need to convince other humans around you to do what you want. And if you're, not good at that, and there's various ways. You can sometimes sit down and just do something on yourself or with a small team, but it's like there's always this tension of what does it make it there.
And so, how long did you stick around at Facebook, post acquisition? And what were you working on during that time? Like, outside, obviously on the Oculus, but like, what were your like core focus? Like, now that you got this like from 75 to 150, you got all this resource. What were your priorities during that period?
I worked a lot on the PC version because then we had the mobile version. We actually brought John Carmack on board, like even before he went in Oculus, like a year in, which was amazing to like work with that kind of legend. But he kind of led the mobile branch, and that was leading more the PC branch on the technical stack. Um, so we shipped like the Oculus Rift. Then a really exciting moment was shipping controllers because really you want to see your hands in VR. Without that, it's not the same. And ultimately, like I had the way we were structured because Facebook wanted us to ship, and we were not actually product in the market. The whole deal assumed they were going to stay for a very long time, which is 5 years. And you can leave earlier, but it's expensive to leave. Basically, you lose big part of what you might get. So that's the way it was structured. So I spent almost 5 years on Facebook, and that's quite a while. So that's actually longer than we were independent by like a factor
Yeah,
of
yeah. That's crazy. And I think, yeah, I mean, you're at Autodesk for 1 year.
1 year.
Okay, so the five time five x 5x.
I went, and it was better in many ways because we're in person. Lots of like Facebook has good campus, and the whole thing is growing. So there's like a lot of pluses to it. But at the end of the day, as a founder, if you don't think you can influence a meaningful enough area, then you want to do something else.
Yeah.
And and I realized at that point, I had a certain understanding of where the VR and AR is heading. Like things like you need to be able to reconstruct the world around you. You want to be able to track objects, track people. There's all these teams which were started inside of Facebook who did these. And you also want to make better hardware and ship SDKs, like all these more obvious things. So it was kind of clear how this technology is going to converge. It's just a lot of work. And we got with Facebook really strong teams with people who are better at computer vision than I am, better in many areas. So there was like some sense that, there's people who are much more knowledgeable, and it really won't make a big difference if I stay in this industry or not. And I'm like, okay, what do I actually want to do for myself? And I really like programming languages. And there was with one moment where I got interested in biology of aging. And I kind of started thinking about in a very different direction from that on.
I haven't worked at Meta, but I can imagine this being kind of surrounded by just like holy shit, like everyone is brilliant here. The Oculus is in good hands. It's going to be in good hands. And I guess before moving on to your kind of next ventures, like when you reflect back on the Meta Facebook experience, what were some like key takeaways? Like I've never worked at Meta, but I heard you learn a lot and you work real hard. What were some like just like things that you take with you to this day from that Meta experience?
I think it was humbling because you sort of build these startups and as an engineer and as a lead, you grow. And there's probably a certain amount of ego which I've built out. And then when you go into a big organization and you're basically told like you can't really make decisions the way you want to, and you have to talk to people, interact. There's a lot of like this. So you have to work within the system, which is a certain kind of politics or an achievement. So I think it humbled me because I was surrounded by other strong people around me. And it also forced me to work in an environment where I couldn't make decisions as quickly or as the way I like it as much, and I had to collaborate. So, and work smoothly with others. So I think that was a good learning experience in a sense. Also, like how do you rate employees? How do you teams work together? What is cross-team dynamics when they belong to different organizations? Because, for example, one deliverable we had to work with like a firmware team, which is now has also other deliverables. So how do you make that? So it was good about learning how to work with people and in some ways. In other ways, it was discouraging because you really feel limited as a founder, because at some point you can spend a lot of effort trying to get a few, what they call headcount engineers you can hire to work on a thing. And you know you could just hire them personally, write a check. And then instead you spend time in many meetings with many people trying to convince them why this is needed. And by the time, if it's approved, by the time you're approved, you kind of come to a point you don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah. And also the opportunity might be fleeting. You're like,
Yeah, I mean, like it's an opportunity or not. So it's one of those things where, like, if it's aligned with groupthink, then it moves quickly. Or if Mark from the top comes in with this matters, it like, but otherwise it has to like bubble up and be very democratic-ish, and it's not very effective.
yeah, I can see how found like that would be a struggle if you've got that like kind of that founder DNA in you where you're like, God damn it. Like I feel like I'm cuffed right now. Like I can't just like go wild. But I also can imagine that that humbling experiences and also cross-departmental and like all of these stakeholders is a valuable experience and lesson that you can learn from, from being there. And so you're like, okay, you now are starting to get interested in biology, and you're now looking at your next opportunity. What was on the horizon for you, and you decided to leave Meta?
There was a moment, I think about a year in, which I was at the event where I was talking about VR, and Aubrey de Grey, who is kind of a famous gerontologist and longevity, was talking about biology of aging. So I ended up listening to his talk and then reading about it. And there's, of course, mention of DNA sequencing and like how does aging accumulate and how do we change with age. And then I got interested enough to learn his book. So, and then my mind started going like, well, we're kind of like these biological machines that are very small. And if we can understand it and model it, and it clearly needs to be computational. And then there was this whole genomics revolution, which happened before this. Maybe we can understand biology. Maybe we could do something about aging. And I'm like, it. And my view was like, you learn, you grow in your life, you try to get better at things, um, and then you grow as a human being. Maybe you learn, like you evolve, and then you just start falling apart and die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just like I don't think there's any law of physics says that must happen. So the that's like you know, so I got very interested in the subject. So it's maybe about a year into Facebook, I was a year and a half, I got very interested in like aging and biology of aging. And I thought maybe I can invest in companies who are doing this. I'm going to study this. So I actually ended up there's Berkeley Extension nearby here where you can just sign up for classes, so you don't have to like sign up for a degree. But lots of pre-med students go there. So I decided to like sign up and go take biology and like
Cool.
biochemistry and stuff there. So I took like dozens of class. So like it was like a moment where like, okay, I'm going to go into longevity. I'm going to do this. I want to be investing, but I want to understand what I'm investing in. So
Yeah.
I've decided that I'm going to go study biology. So there was this moment where I was like working full time on Facebook and going to class like 2 or 3 times a week. And I took like biochemistry without taking organic chemistry first, which was like the hardest thing ever. And
Yeah.
I was there, was studying every night. It was a book, and then like in a bus to work on Facebook. So I just thought it was I wanted to know how do we work. And then also I started going to lots of meetups, and meetups around and conference around longevity specifically. So there was, I'm doing aging in Berlin. There was like ARED. So I started making friends in longevity space. And also because I exited, I felt like I had capital I could invest, but I had this really strong sense that you could lose a lot of money fast in biotech. That
Yeah.
is like, all the capital I made for was because I'm like just one of the founders. Like we had many other investors and team. So it's not like I make a good amount, but not that much. So I could probably like almost try to take one drug to market, but then I'll be completely broke. And because 90% of drugs fail,
Yeah.
it is basically, I
Just
could,
wipe you out.
I was just doing one biotech from beginning to start. So it needs to be more impactful and broader in some way. So I wanted to learn and be cautious before I dive in. But I sort of decided that I really care about this.
I love that you're just like, I mean, people, if you're in the Bay Area, for anyone listening out there, like, yeah, you can just sign up for Berkeley extension classes. My wife did that too for like databases. um, and you can just like, she works full time at Cloudflare. And she's like, I need to brush up on some of this stuff. And just like, you can just go sign up for it. It's awesome. But I can't recommend taking biochemistry before you take OChem. That that must have been really, really difficult.
It was the hardest class in my life. And I made this kind of thing that will actually work for a grade. I didn't actually plan to get any degree or anything, but I was like, I will actually do all the homework and I'm going to do the tests.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that. And so, okay, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm not completely fish out of the water in biology. When like I know you started investing and you formed Formic Ventures. When was it like, okay, I'm ready for this. Like I can do this.
near the time, so I quit Facebook in 2019 and I was starting to think about investing, and this is what I want to do around that time. And as I've been in the space for a bit, I've actually made a few friends. One of the friends I made was Alex Zhavrenkov, CEO of In Silico Medicine. And I talked to him a bunch, and I knew he was like running around. He was organizing a conference called ARDD, which is a really good event. And he was at other events and really promoting longevity and promoting his company. And I was like, this is really cool. So I was thinking about investing in his company. And ultimately, I and ended up investing in the series he was raising in 2019, which was my first investment was that and Schrodinger. And the way Schrodinger happened was because Wuxi connected us and they were raising like whatever, whether it's private VC round. So I'm like, okay. And there was this moment where I was sort of like wanting to quit Facebook, but then I didn't. Um, for like a quarter. The way I made it through 5 years, at first I said I'll quit in a year. And then like a year goes by, I'll quit in 6 months. 6 months, and I'll quit in another like 4 months. So I made it almost all the way. I didn't make it all the way through, but I made it most of the way. And I didn't kind of vest quarterly. So there was a moment where I decided to quit in February, and then I talked to my manager. And I also got interested in AI because I figured artificial intelligence will matter a lot for longevity and biotech. And I didn't know that much. So there was this PyTorch team, which is kind of a core. There's PyTorch and there's TensorFlow. I think PyTorch is very big in machine learning. So I wanted to learn it. So I just decided that I'm going to leave Oculus and transition to PyTorch team for the last like year of my tenure there. So I did that, and I don't wouldn't say I made a big impact there. I kind of joined. I think you get to learn it for the first 6 months, and you're gonna actually deliver. And I helped them with documentation. I found some bugs. I improved processes and some things. Like, so I learned a bunch about PyTorch, but ultimately I realized it was still not. I still don't want to stay in the company. I wanted to do my biology thing. So I like was like, okay, I'm gonna quit. And my manager at the time, there was like some reason she didn't want me to quit. And she was like, why don't you just stay? And you don't have to do a whole lot of work. You can like time off. You do another quarter with this. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stay, and all the money I get from this quarter, I'm gonna invest in biotech. So it's
Yeah.
gonna. I'm not gonna get money anyway.
Yeah.
So otherwise, so I'm like, I'll just put that. So I ended up investing into the in silica medicine and Schrodinger. And those were my first two, and they were kind of slightly larger investments that I normally would make later on because I really liked both companies and I really liked Alex. So that's kind of how my biotech investing started. And then I decided, and I quit Facebook and I came back and I was like, okay, I'm going to get more disciplined. I'm going to get real experience. Like I had a few advisors, but I'm going to form like a more of an actual structure and do proper research before investing. So we got some point we got a full-time PhD on staff who was had by in biology of aging, who was and really connected to biosciences. So I looked at that and I decided I was very interested in one, any kind of therapeutic thing which addresses aging, and also scientific tools, as in either like wet lab, automation, anything which helps you do discovery and or software around simulation to speed up progress. So those were two themes where I decided to start Formic Ventures with. And that's ultimately what I decided I'm going to go and I'm going to do mostly seed, sometimes like early A contributions um, to companies that I like.
Cool. And I guess, how did you learn the ins and outs of investing? Was it via the advisor, or did you also do a Berkeley extension?
Investing, like after being through a few rounds of startups in the space, you kind of know bits of it. And we and Brendan did fundraise, so I was in the circle.
Yep.
And I also did a lot of finance research personally for over like 7 years. I would read books and such, and it was more public markets and things, but I kind of knew about risk and things and the idea of how do you raise revenue from running a company. There's all these things which I kind of knew. So it wasn't any official learning I did for that. But I did bring my chief of staff, my best friend who joined me, and he has an MBA and he was helping me run family office and then this, and I bring one finance guy on board in addition to the PhD. So we had a group of people who could help me analyze and make decisions. It wasn't, I don't think it was as structured maybe as other funds because also I was very mission driven. So if you think about a very thoughtful fund would really understand the return profile of what they're investing in, and they would be very like they kind of predict here's what conditions might be true for these kind of returns. Here's a probability, and you model it, and you make a criteria based on that, and you kind of do this whole analysis as you build your portfolio, right? And for me, it was more important to move longevity and move the industry forward. It's just as important as making money. So I don't want to invest in something where I'll lose money, right? Clearly, and I want to be thoughtful and analytical. If I don't, so I want to believe they will succeed or have a good chance of succeeding, or at least it's so meaningful that I'm willing to take a high risk gamble. So, but that's more risk and impact focus than a traditional VC. So that was kind of a distinction. And ultimately ended up going to lots of events and meeting startup founders and listening and learning about science. And that's really the fun part.
Yep.
Like you have young, enthusiastic people presenting you cool science and you get, to immerse yourself in it. I think the biggest challenge, though, or thing which was kind of tricky in biotech, is it's very easy to get enthusiastic about thinking you understand some mechanism of action and here's why this will solve this major disease or issue, and it seems so incredible. But the wisdom is not in understanding those details, because clearly it requires some knowledge, but is actually what are all the things which can go wrong? What is the actual data that you need? And I didn't really have that experience. I was delegating that. But I think that's the hard thing in biotech, is that you really need to have that critical analytical experience eye, because most things are not going to work in all kinds of ways. So you need to be able to filter that out.
I feel the same exact way, where I get like inspired and fired up hearing about like, what like like nucleate the student run org, and I talk to a lot of grad students who are like excited to like translate their technology and commercialize it. And then I get very fired up about it. And then, but also there's so many factors above and beyond the science itself, right? You're trying to figure out what are all these other risks. There's like operational risk, there's like the macro, there's like the finance, and then like there's like regulatory as well. So it's like this like big, hairy kind of like audacious thing. And I'm not a VC, so but I can imagine that like trying to, especially for you're like, okay, I'm passionate about biology and I'm going to learn this. Like you're kind of like in the beginning playing catch up, and then now you're there. You're like, this is like investing on hard mode, like in a space where like there's so many different factors that could really like change the momentum really quickly.
Thanks for listening to part 3 of our conversation with Michael Antonov. In the final episode of this series, Michael walks us through Deep Origin's product suite, how they're making advanced drug discovery tools more accessible, and what the future of biological stimulation could look like. He also shares lessons on building mission-driven startups, his evolving philosophy on fundraising, and why staying consistent is one of the most powerful traits for any founder. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. See you next time. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.